great because it took a launch of a whole series to get John out in the open, flush him out where we can all meet him and see him and hear him. And that was great. I'm Marian, and I'm the author of Downshifting Made Easy. So if anything should be simple and easy, downshifting is it. I was thinking, as I was coming over here today, that I was thinking back to many years ago when I was about 18 and I did some sales training. And with sales training, they tell you that you have to believe in your product. And so it occurred to me that that's very appropriate for writers as well. Because our product is our books. If you're a fiction writer, your product is stories. If you're a non-fiction writer, your product is ideas and concepts. And so for a non-fiction writer, the important thing, I think, is to be passionate about your subject. And there are several subjects that I'm passionate about, and downshifting, living lightly on the earth, is one of them. So it's something that I think is starting to come through here, there and everywhere in our culture now, is the realization that we all have to live a little bit more lightly on the earth so that the earth can support human beings. But people know that they should take a few steps to live more simply. They should take a few steps to downshift to have a lighter, smaller eco footprint. But should and ought are not very good motivators. They just make people feel guilty. What I try and do in my books, and this is the second book that I've written about this kind of subject, is to inspire people and to try and get them to understand that when you successfully downshift to living lightly and simply on the earth, your life becomes ever so much more joyful. It really, really does. And I'm glad that next month I'll turn 75, and I think it's really good to be 75 and to be able to look back to times when life was more simple and we did live more lightly on the earth, because I remember what it was like in World War II. And that everybody, apart from the fact that they were dropping bombs on us, because I lived in Plymouth during the Blitz, but apart from that small item, people were basically just as happy as they are now, if not happier, more contented with their lives, or just as contented. So what I learned as a small child, or what I really learned retrospectively, thinking back on my childhood, was that you actually don't need stuff, a lot of stuff, to make you happy. In fact, the more stuff you've got, the more anxiety you have, because you're afraid someone's going to... there's a song, what was it, from Paul Best, about they'll take it away. It's the more stuff you've got, the more you worry about losing it. So when I talk about downshifting, I talk about the joy of downshifting, and I talk about the spiritual aspects of it, because it is a spiritual thing. And one of the things I've noticed is that it goes both ways, because people who downshift, who move to a simpler, lighter lifestyle, discover that there are spiritual aspects to it. And people who have followed a spiritual path often find themselves becoming more simple in their living, and living more lightly. So whichever way you start, you finish up in the same place. So the other thing about being nearly 75 is that I've lived long enough to have experienced a lot of different kinds of light living. And when I very first started, and it's hard to remember how this all began for me personally, but it started with the sort of traditional thing that people think of when you talk about downshifting, which was, living in the country and keeping chickens and living off the land and doing all that. But one of the things that I find it really important to point out to people in my books is that living in the country, and the sort of the classical good life thing with the wellies and the mud and all of that, that is not necessary to live simply and lightly on the earth. I've learnt that now from experience because I've lived lightly in the city, in an apartment, in downtown San Francisco where we walked everywhere or caught the streetcar. I've done it in an English village. I've done it in all kinds of different places. So you don't have to move house to downshift. There are lots of things you don't have to do to downshift. So if you want to know the things you do have to do to downshift and the what and the where and the when and the how of it, then you'll just have to buy my book. So, how am I going for time? Is my 5 minutes up?
It's 6 minutes. We can go another minute or 2.
6 minutes. No, that's fine because it leads absolutely. It leads into introducing one of the other authors, and I think I'm introducing you.
You are.
I am. And something that I have been interested in for a long, long time, because I was a psychologist before I retired and just became an author, was psychosynthesis. And Steffi's book is demystifying and making simple and making easy psychosynthesis. So I'd like to introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, the author of Psychosynthesis Made Easy, Stephanie Sorrell.